Hello and welcome to Willow Woodworks. My name is Richard, and today we're going to be working on a drawing project of a hat rack, or you could call it a coat rack, either way. This project comes from Daniel Hammes of Bearded Viking Woodworks. If you'd like to do some projects, some smalls especially, this project is for you. I'll leave a link in the description to the Bearded Viking Woodworks YouTube channel and to his Facebook channel in the description. So if you're interested, let's follow along and let's get started. Okay, so here we are in front of the computer and we're getting ready to start making our hat rack. And I'm going to start here by using the front plane here and opening up a sketch. And I'm going to be creating the backer for this piece first, for this project, I should say. But now normally because the backer is just a rectangle, usually I would just, normally I would just take and start and just draw a rectangle like that. But I have a particular reason for wanting to do it a different way. And I'm going to show you just how. First, I'm going to start with a construction line, or a center line, shall we say. And now we'll take and we'll create our solid line. I'm going to go from my origin point, just come on out, up, and then back to the center line. Now if I highlight the whole thing, all I have to do is say mirror it, okay? And what that does is when I move the left side out, you'll see the right side is mirroring what I'm doing on the left side. And that can save you a lot of time. And there's another good reason I'm doing it this way, which you will see a little bit later on. But for right now, let's just give this thing some dimensions here. We want this height to be 4 inches. And we want the width of this to be at 4.5. Okay. So now let's extrude this and give it some thickness. So we're going to make it 3/4 of an inch thick. Okay. And now that we have that, let's give it some texture. And if I remember correctly, the texture that the material, I should say, not the texture, the material that Daniel used for this particular project was actually walnut. So I'm going to use some walnut in here as well and give us a really nice looking piece. Now here's where things get a little interesting. I've been busy making what they call a design feature that I can add to a feature library. Everything that I do, whether it be an extrude or a cut into a part, is called a feature. But I can create what they call a feature library or a design feature that is going to save me a lot of time. Because on the back side of this, I'm going to select the back side and open a sketch, go normal to it. I'm going to insert, put a line in here, and I'm going to go from my origin point straight on up. Okay, so now I've got a line in here. Now I'm going to take and I'm going to put 2 points on that line. I'm going to put 1 point there. I'm going to put another point down here. Okay. Now let's take and dimension the position of those. We know that they're already positioned in the center of the part, left and right, but now we need to position it vertically. So the top one, we're going to go with 1 1/8. And with the bottom one, we're going to go from the bottom, we're going to go 5/8 of an inch. Okay. So now I'm done with that sketch. Now you're going to see how things really play out for us here. I'm going to put this on an angle. I'm going to say insert a feature from my feature library. And I have this file here called keyhole slot. So I'm going to open that up, select this face, select that point, and say OK. It looks like I missed something here. There we go. And there's my keyhole in there. It does all of the features for me, so I don't have to do all the individual, cuts and so forth to be able to create that. So now I just come back here, and we're going to say feature library, the other keyhole, because we need two of them. And boom, there's the other keyhole slot. So now we got both keyholes in here. And if you look at this way, you can probably see it a lot better. You can see how internally what the keyhole slot looks like. This is where we plunged in at, and then we moved up and then came back out, and then it brought our bit back out through the same plunge hole. Okay, so there's our backer for the moment. So we're going to say file, save as, and we're just going to call this backer. All right. So now that we have the backer created, we need to create the other three components for this hat rack. And what I'm going to work with here, I'm going to start a new part, and I'm going to go to the front plane again, say open a sketch, and in this case I'm just going to create a regular rectangle, and I'm going to give this some dimension here. We want this to be 3 3/4, and we want this down here to be 1 3/8. Okay, now that we have that, we need to give it some three-dimensional thickness. So we're going to make this 3/4 of an inch thick. All right. But now let's do the same things we did before. Let's give this a little bit of some texture. And this time we're going to go back. We're going to use our pine selection here. And we'll make some adjustments to it. Oh, that looked kind of cool. Just leave it like that. Now here's the one thing about this. This is going to be the end piece that's on each side, okay? So we have a left and a right hand piece. But I don't need to create each two different files, one for the left hand piece and one for the right hand piece. And here's why. Because what I can do is I can take up here and I can say, let's add a configuration. And I'm going to call this configuration is going to be called left. So this is going to be the piece that's on the left-hand side, which means that on the right-hand side out here on this face is where I want a hole to go through here. Okay, so I'm going to select that face and open a sketch, go normal to it, and I'm going to take and put in that circle there, and I'm going to give that circle a dimension of 1/4 of an inch. All right. I also want that to be 3/16 away, the center of it, to be 3/16 away from the back of it. And I'm going to point out later on about this, but I'm going to give this a dimension from the bottom to the center of that hole, a dimension of 0.8277. Now, that sounds like a really weird number, and it is, I understand, but you'll see why a little bit later. Now that we've got that drawn, I can now cut that hole into the part, and I want to go 3/4 of an inch deep. So I just punch it in there. All right. Now, when I go back up here to my configurations, I can go to the default configuration, and you see that there's no hole there. There's no hole on this side. That's because it's in that configuration. If I go to the left configuration, there's no hole on that side, but there's my hole on this side. So I'm going to go back to my default configuration. Then I say I want to add a configuration, and we're going to call this right. Now I can go over here to this side and say I want to open a sketch, go normal to it, put my circle in here, give it some dimension as a 1/4 inch. But now there's one problem with this. I could add the dimensions on here of what I entered in on the other side, okay, for the left-hand piece. But what if I accidentally mistype the number, okay? Then this won't line up with the other side of the piece. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete that, okay? And I'm going to come up here and say, show the sketch. What's going on here? Oh, I know why. Show, whoops. There we go. So now I can see the sketch that's on this side. All right. Now I can say, let's open up a sketch on this side, because I can see that circle from this other sketch. I can select that and just say, transfer it to this side. Now I can hide that sketch. And now it's automatically positioned perfectly to the other side. So now I can say cut extrude, my 3/4 of an inch. And so now I have my hole on that side, but not that side. But when I go to the left side, there's the hole and no hole. So I've got one file that has everything I need. So now I can just say save as, and I'm just going to simply call this ends, because that's what it is. It's the two end pieces. And now we have those created. Now we need to create the center hook, the part that's going to be folding out on us, to create the actual hat hook itself. So again, I'm going to go to the part, and I'm going to say front plane, open a sketch, and I'm going to take and create my rectangle again like I did before, and I want my height to be my, 3 3/4, and I want my width to be 1 3/8. Okay? Again, we'll give it a 3rd dimension for our thickness of the material, and we're going to make that 3/4 of an inch thick. And there we have that much of this part. But now we need to put in, Daniel had a bevel that was back here. Well, I can really take care of that pretty simple. All I have to do is say I want a chamfer that is 45 degrees. I can set it over here on the left side to 45 degrees, and what the distance is, say select that edge, and bang, there's my chamfer. Okay. Now, for the bottom edge, we have a 45-degree angle that's down here as well, but it comes all the way out to this point. Well, this program doesn't quite like doing that, because then it gives me what they call a zero thickness error message down there. So the best thing I can do is just simply say, let's select that face, open a sketch, go normal to it, and I'm going to say I want to go from that corner to here and up, and have this come down to here. And now I can give that angled line a dimension of 45 degrees. And then sit back and say, cut, extrude that all the way through to the other side. So now we have that all the way down there for the bottom part of the piece. Now we've got two other things that we need to do. The first thing is we need to put the hole that goes through here. So I'm going to select that face again, go normal to it, and I'm going to put my circle in here, and I'm going to give that circle a dimension of 1/4 of an inch. So I have that. I also know that from the back side to the center of the hole, according to Daniel's video, he said it was 3/16 from the back side, and it's 3/16 from here, dimensioned like this. At least I'm assuming that's the way he was demonstrating in his video. So here's the thing. I can add another dimension on here, even though I don't really need to, and say from the center of that to this bottom point, okay, is 0.8277. That's why I gave those other pieces this dimension. So that's where I got that number from. Okay. So now once I have that positioned, I can say cut, extrude all the way through, and there we've got our hole that goes all the way through. But now we have one other little problem here. This edge right here isn't rounded, and because this wants to rotate about its axis, we need to give and smooth out this radius, or this corner, I should say, right there. Well, I can do that with a simple fillet, and I can say, use that dimension there, and there we go. We've just rounded it off so that we have a nice smooth transition now for our part. Let's go back to our normal view. Let's give this piece some texture. But I'm going to do one other thing a little bit different. We have our texture, but now I'm going to say, give it some color blend so I can make it a little bit darker, okay? So it'll stand out when we do the assembly. All right. Now I'm going to take and say, save as, and I'm just simply going to call this center. So we now have that. Now well, now that we have those parts made, we need a dowel. Now, even though we're not going to be able to see the dowel when we do the assembly. You know, once everything's put together, you're really not going to see it, but I still like to have the dowel just for the drawing purpose. So we're going to create a new part for our dowel. This time I'm going to use the right plane and open a sketch. So now I'm going to take at my origin point, I'm going to create my circle. I'm going to give it a dimension of 1/4 of an inch. And now we want to extrude that. Now we need to add up all of our length here. We have our 1 3/8 that we need to go through for the centerpiece. We also had 3/4 of an inch on the left side and 3/4 of an inch on the right side. So by the time we add all of that up, we come up with 2 7/8. So I'm going to extrude this 2.875, and there's our dowel. Now, even though I could just leave this just like that, a gray color, because you're really not going to see it when I build the assembly, because it's going to be hidden inside the other parts. But if I wanted to be technical about it, all right, let's just give it some color. If I remember correctly, I believe Daniel used a piece of copper, so I can give it a copper look. And now I could say File, Save as my dowel, and there I have the dowel. Well, now that I believe we have all of the parts created for this thing, I think it's time we start doing some assembly. So I'm going to select Assembly, and I'm going to insert our backer first, because that's our foundation of everything. Computer's acting a little slow for me today. So there's our backer. And we can see that on the back side, there's our pocket holes, or not pocket holes, our key slot holes that we had in there. So now let's take and insert one of our end pieces. So I'm going to say the ends, but over here I can select which configuration I want. At this point, I'm going to start with the left configuration. So we're going to put that in here. You can see there's our hole that's on the right hand side. And now I can do what they call the mates. And I want to mate the front face of the backer to the back face of that end piece. Okay. Now that I have that, I need to position it over here, something kind of like that. Okay. Now I'm going to add another mate, because I want from the face of the left side of the backer to the left side of that end piece. I don't want it to be flush. I want it to be a specific distance. In this particular case, it's 3/16 of an inch. All right. So now that I have that, I also need to mate up the top to the top of this. Again, I don't want it to be flush. Let's see, I'll also want that to be specific distance of 0.1875, or in other words, 3/16. So we have our 3/16 there. And that's not correct. So that means I need to go back and change that distance. And I believe now we should be at 1/8, should center us up on our backer. There we go. That looks a lot nicer now. All right, so we've got that much done. Now we can insert our dowel. So let's put our dowel in here. Now, this is where things get a little tough sometimes. because when I go to do the mates for this, what I want is this left end of the dowel to be at the bottom of the hole. Well, I can't always see the bottom of the hole. In this case, I can. So I can say I want the bottom of the hole to be mated to the end of the dowel, and it moves it over. But now I'm not lined up with the hole, but I can say I want the hole itself and the dowel to be concentric. And so there we have our dowel in place. Now we can add our centerpiece. So let's take and grab our center. And there's our centerpiece. Now in this particular case, because this piece needs to be movable, okay, I'm going to start by saying let's take the hole that's there and our dowel and make it concentric. All right, that at least gets me lined up with that much. And you see now, it wants to tilt forward already. So now I need to take and mate this right side of the end piece with the left side of our centerpiece. So I've got that now lined up. All right. Now I can take and insert our end piece, but now I want to select the right-hand side, and I'm going to bring it over here, somewhat out of the way, and we add some mates to that. Again, I want the front face of the backer to the back side of that end piece. Okay. I also want the dowel to line up with the hole. So that takes and lines me up there by making them concentric. And now I can take and bring the face of that and bring it up flush to the face of that. And there we have it. There's our part. So now I can say File, Save, and I'm going to simply call this Hat Rack. And now, excuse me, I can now take and move this part so it comes down, and I'm doing what they call a collision detection. If I had not rounded off that corner on the back side back here, this wouldn't be able to rotate. But now, because it does rotate, it tells me that all clear. Now the ding that you hear is it's coming to the end. So it's now up against the back face of, or the front face of the backer. And now this is tilting down to show that now that the end down here is now hit the front of the backer. And so there we have our assembly of the hat rack. Okay, now we can finally move on to doing our drawing. So we'll start with our drawing sheet. And as usual, I like to add the completed project on the very first page. So we'll get this set up. We'll change our scaling here. So that we now have this for our first sheet. Now I can come down and say add a sheet. So I start with a nice clean sheet of paper again. And now we can start inserting the actual parts themselves. So I'm going to start with the end pieces. I'm going to start with the left piece. If you remember, we used one file to actually create the left and right hand piece. But I need to show you, see the dotted line here, that's for our hole that's in the side of it. So I need a view that's going to show that hole. So I'm going to create a projected view, just like that. And now I'm going to go ahead and add in our end piece for the right side. We'll stick that over here somewheres. Make sure we got our dotted lines, and then add in our projected view, which will show the hole that's actually there. Now I can take and insert the centerpiece. We'll show the front view of that. Stick it down here. And again, we need to see a side view of this. So we're going to put in our projected view so that we have that. I think I'm going to need to move things over a little bit here, because I'm going to need to add in up here our dowel pin, because we definitely need to see that. Use our sheet scale for that. I'm going to stick this up in here. Another projected view to show the end of it. I think I can now move this over a little bit closer to where I originally had it. And then of course we need to have a view of our backer. So we can stick that down in here. And we need to show the thickness of that. So we'll need a projected view of that, and you can see our pocket, or key slot. I keep calling it pocket holes for some reason. Our key slot holes that are in here that's invisible, but we can see the location of it from this view, even though it's on the back side of it. Now we can go ahead and insert all of our dimensions. And this is where things can get to be a bit of a mess, because it puts so many dimensions on here at once that at times it can be a mess. And so I'm going to have to go back through here and adjust all of this. And get everything set. There's the thickness of our material. There's the width of our material. And now we've got the same thing over here. We've got the depth of the hole. We've got the diameter of the hole. I'm going to move that to this side, I think. Until I get everything sorted out. Get this dimension up in here. There's the thickness of our material. There's a distance for that, and the width of our piece. And I don't like the way it does that one, so I'm going to hide that dimension and just manually redimension it, just like that. And now I've got the same problem down here. going to take and hide that. I'm just going to show that there. There's that. Move this over here. And just because I put dimensions on the drawing doesn't mean that it always comes out the way I really want it to be. This dimension belongs to that. We don't need all of these dimensions on here, so we'll get rid of those, which will clean up everything quite a bit. That one we do need. Okay. There's that. Okay, that's a dimension that we need. So we're going to hang on to that. We need 45 degrees here. Let's see, I can move this over a little bit, give me a little bit more room. That's the diameter of no, I'm sorry, that's the radius that I put out there on the end. I think that takes care of that. And I can move these over to give me a little bit more room as well. We don't need that. And we don't need that. We already know it's 3/8 of an inch deep. So there goes to show all of our parts. So now I can just take and start adding to these annotations, these notes on here. I can add in here. That's for the left end. This is going to be the right end. That's our centerpiece. This over here is our backer. So now we've got all of our parts labeled. Looks like I believe we got all of our dimensions on here. I think I might want to neaten this one up a little bit to show that. I'll move this up like that. That looks a little better. And now we can move on to adding another sheet. Now, one thing I've already done here is I've already created a different configuration. If you remember how I created the configurations before. And what I did is I created a separate configuration of the assembly. And I called it Exploded View. That ends up looking like that. So it has the pieces all separated, but it shows how everything goes together. And then, of course, I can also add in on here the same assembly view, but this time with everything closed up. And now at this point, I can just simply add some annotations in here. Just a note pointing to that to say that that is our backer. Add another note on here to point out that this is the left end piece. The right end piece. The center piece. And of course the last one being that I can put in here to show that that is our dowel. I know it seems kind of crazy to have to label these pieces like that, but you never can tell with some people. I've seen people make comments and, you know, it's like, well, nothing shows how it's supposed to go together. Well, hey, now you can see how it's supposed to go together. I'm sorry if you can't figure that out even by watching the video, but so let's just make it a little dummy proof. Let's show them how to put it together. So there you have it. We've got our finished view here for our assembly. Here we've got all of our parts with all of our dimensions to show the diameter of the holes, location of the holes, and so on. And then, of course, our finished product here. So that's our drawing. Well, there you have it. If you're looking for a single hat rack, then this is the project for you. Now it's up to you to get out into your workshop and make some sawdust. Have a great day, people, and we'll catch you next time.